What's going on, everybody? I'm Primalliquid and welcome to me doing something dumb. Yeah, I'm doing something that I probably shouldn't really be doing given, you know, how polarizing this topic can be. But we're going to rank all the Final Fantasy games. Well, I say all of them, but all the main entries. You know, we're not doing spin-offs or anything like that, you know, like Crystal Chronicles, Tactics, things like that. Mainly due to the fact that there are some spin-offs that I have not played. So we are going to be doing the main number titles, but we are also going to include their sequels. So, you know, things like FF4, we're going to also include After Years. FF10, we're also going to include 10-2. And then for 13, we're going to include all 13 games. And of course, just remember, guys, this is only my opinion, okay? You guys will very likely have different rankings to me, so let's keep things in the comments civil. But if you do disagree with my rankings, it doesn't matter what game, if you disagree with any of my placements, comment down below, let me know where you would rank that game and why. It's like conversations like these are always fun and can be kind of memey. But with that said, let's jump into it, shall we? So we're just going to change over to the screen here. It's already set up. So we have here FF1 all the way through to FF15. Obviously, there's no more numbered titles just yet. And then here we have our little tier list: S, A, B, C, and D. So obviously S being the best, D being the worst. And we're just going to go through them in order. Now, I'm going to explain why I think they belong where they do. And then, of course, you know, you guys can reply in the comments and disagree and fight me over it. So, without further ado, let's start, shall we? So, Final Fantasy I, where the series first began. Now, this is an interesting one, okay? Because while it started probably the greatest game series ever, the first game, while iconic for its time, it doesn't quite hold up that amazing, okay? The story is rather lackluster, it's kind of short, and the gameplay is bare bones, but it is everything that Final Fantasy really encaptures, you know? It's a long story. Well, I say it's a long story. I mean, it was long for its time. But it's a story about saving the world. You start off nice and simple. Plenty of battles, grinding, loads of different gear and things like that. But because of how short it is, and, you know, there is sort of a lack of classes. You know, you've got the warrior, the thief, the black mage, the white mage, and the monk. I think it's a good middle ground, you know? I think if people haven't played FF1, if they went back to it and played it now, they might not enjoy it as much, just because of all the more recent titles, or even titles from, you know, the PS1 and that. So what I'm going to do is, with FF1, I'm going to actually put this in the B tier, basically smack dab in the middle, you know? Simply due to the fact, I think if somebody went and played this today, it's going to be 50-50, you know, on whether they would enjoy it. As for me personally, I'm also in that category of 50-50. I do like a lot of the ideas in one, but having experienced, you know, all these other games, it is a little lacking, to be honest. But it still has that bare bones Final Fantasy feel to it. And that's why I think, you know, middle suits it. So let's move on to 2, shall we? So Final Fantasy 2, straight off the bat, like, I'm going to move this straight up to S. Now, Final Fantasy 2 is a love of mine. It is a passion of mine. I love Final Fantasy 2, and I know people are going to disagree with this, okay? Why I like Final Fantasy 2 is the leveling system. There are no levels in Final Fantasy 2. Your stats will raise just by doing battles and that. You know, if you keep attacking, you're going to raise your strength. If you keep getting hit, your health and your defense is going to raise. You keep using magic, your MP is going to raise. You have weapon levels, you have magic levels. There's so many different varieties on what you can level in Final Fantasy 2. It is a grinder's wet dream, okay? The story isn't the greatest, but it is a lot longer than FF1. Still kind of short, you know, you can still speedrun FF2 very, very quickly, but it completely got rid of the whole job system, and it was the first game where your characters could do everything, you know? You could teach white magic 20 character, you could teach black magic 20 character, doesn't matter. You could build the characters however you like. And of course, you know, there are the mini games, the puzzles, and things like that. The post-game content released in the PSP version of FF2 was also pretty good because it acted as a sequel to the main story with, you know, the Emperor, what happened in Pandemonium, and all things like that. So that's why I think FF2 deserves its place as an S rank. It is definitely a game that if you've not played, give it a try. Now, for FF1 and FF2, if you've not played either of these and you want to, play the PSP version. That is my personal take. I think that is the superior version. That is also the version with all of the extra content for both of these games. NES version, no extra content. The Pixel remaster on Steam, no extra content. If you want the extra content, PSP only. That is above and beyond the best version for these two games, if you ask me. Right, Final Fantasy Vii. Now, Final Fantasy Vii, it went back to the job system, a little like FF1, only it was much more in-depth. There was a lot more jobs, and it also really, really opened up. And it's also where the last Final Fantasy that I did an overpowered video for. If you haven't seen it, go check it out, it's on the channel. Now, Final Fantasy Vii it's a weird one, okay? It's a really, really weird one, because depending on the version you play, there are quite a lot of differences. Now, the original Final Fantasy Vii was very, very easy. You start the game with basically the most overpowered job and all of that stuff, and then there's also quite a lot of bugs that you can really abuse, but the fights were also very lacking and straightforward. Whereas if you played something like the 3DS version, it is way harder. There's also a lot more mini games as well involved with, you know, the Mognet feature from the Nintendo DS. So if you're playing the Steam version, that's just turned into like a normal mail system. The story is, I'm not a fan. Like, I know people are going to moan about that because FF3's story is quite loved, especially with Cloud of Darkness. I'm not a big fan personally. Like, the story, it has its moments, but overall I consider the story to be rather boring, you know. And then with the job system and the leveling system, again, you sort of do have that min-maxing feel to it, but it's incredibly easy to max out on things you want. And even though there are so many jobs in the game, a lot of them are rather useless. You can use them for the novelty of using them, but they are very lacking. But then there's also, you know, all the back and forth, which is going to be weird to be a negative considering there's back and forth in all of these games. But Final Fantasy Vii, I think, does it in a bad way. You know, it doesn't really give you a very good story purpose for that back and forth. You can definitely tell that a lot of it is just to try and elongate the game and make it longer, because you've got to think these games were released back on the NES, so storage and space was a very big issue back then. So they couldn't just make these massive areas, you know, they couldn't really expand the game. So in order to increase the player time, they had to make battles more frequent, they had to give you reasons to go back and forth between the same area constantly. But FF3 is probably the game that did that worst, at least in my opinion anyway. So what we're going to do with FF3 is I'm going to put that in the middle, simply due to the fact, even though I'm not a fan of the story, there is a lot of content in the actual game because of how many jobs there are. You've got your character levels and you've also got the job levels. So there's quite a lot of maxing in there. It would be an A tier, but the thing that really screws it for me is the airships and the submarine. Like, there's no one ship does it all. You have to keep changing airships, and that to me is very annoying. So with that said, let's move on to Final Fantasy IV. Now this one might be a little polarizing for some people. I'm going to put that in the A tier. So for me, Final Fantasy IV wasn't my first FF game, but it is an incredibly good game, and I think if that is people's first, that's going to be a really good entry point to the Final Fantasy series, okay? So the story is an interesting one because it starts off with you being the bad guy basically, and then obviously, you know, as he goes on, he learns to be a good guy. He gets a heart, basically. You know, he becomes a good guy. He realizes everything he was doing was wrong, and he does change. But then there's also that level of romanticism. Like there's romance in FF4. The story makes sense. There are plot twists which you really don't expect on your first time through. There are some very emotion stirring scenes. Like some of the scenes will definitely stir your emotions for sure. And it's also, in my opinion, the first game in the series that really grasps you. You know, it does that thing that RPGs just love doing, where it just grips you by the collar and it pulls you straight in, and you can't escape. Not only that, you go to the fucking moon on a flying whale. What's not to love? Now, it would be S tier, but the leveling system is Some of the characters are also rather boring and can be quite gimmicky, but there is the Spoony Bard. So for me, it's kind of, it's good, but it's not the best, you know what I mean? This is definitely a game that I would definitely suggest playing if you haven't already. If you have played it and you just haven't played it for years and years and years, go play it again. Why not? Right. Let's move on to the After Years, shall we? So, Final Fantasy IV After Years was a sequel released for Final Fantasy IV. I think it first appeared on the PSP, but it might also be on the Nintendo DS version of FF4. I'm just not 100% sure on that. I know for a fact it is on the PSP version, though. Now, After Years is a sequel. It is set after the events of 4. It's sort of episodic, you know, like you have different scenarios revolving around the different party members, or even technically a new party member. There's only one problem: it's boring as fuck. It is incredibly boring. The stories are also incredibly bad. Now, people might like it. I don't know. I've not really, you know, looked into the fan scene for After Years too much, but for me, it's a D. It's a D. Honestly, if you haven't played it, if you love 4, give it a try. But other than that, I honestly wouldn't bother personally. Like I really don't rate After Years. Right, let's move on to number 5, shall we? And number 5, I'm sorry to all the fans of number 5. I don't like it. I'm not a fan. Like I only did my first ever playthrough. I want to say like 2-3 years ago now. I actually streamed my first ever playthrough, and it didn't grip me. You know, like I mean, come on, the final boss is a fucking tree. It's a goddamn tree. You know what I mean? There were some interesting moments, don't get me wrong, there were some interesting moments, but for the most part, there was nothing overwhelmingly gripping about it, and the battles also got a little tedious, if you ask me, but it did have some fun new encounters. You know, I love 5's version of Omega Weapon. You also actually have Gilgamesh, who I think appeared in 5. Wait, was Gilgamesh in 5? I'm almost positive Gilgamesh was in 5. I don't know. I can't remember actually on that one. But yeah, either way, 5, it didn't grip me. There was the grinding, you know, it's just, Like, if you haven't played it, you're not really missing too much. If you want to play every game in the series, give it a try. For me personally, it was, I've done it once. Well, I've done it a few times now, to be fair. But I'm probably not gonna do it again. Like the only time I'm gonna play 5 again is for an overpowered video or for challenge videos. That's probably all I'm ever gonna play 5 for. I mean, I know I've got to do a 100% walkthrough for YouTube as well. That will probably be the last time I do a normal playthrough for 5, to be honest. Like it's not my cup of tea. Right, Final Fantasy VI. Please don't murder me in the comments. Okay, please don't murder me in the comments, and please don't dislike the video for what I'm about to say. So, Final Fantasy VI it's a game I've not played in a long time. Let me preface this. I've not played 6 in a very, very long time. The last time I played 6 was on the PS3. Okay, so quite a long time ago, and even then it was, you know, a good while ago on that. So with 6, I will admit I can't remember everything about it, but it suffers from a big problem for me personally. So the story, in my opinion, is a little lacking. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the characters in 6, but Kefka is a goddamn awesome villain. And when you think about it, he's also pretty much the only villain in Final Fantasy that actually succeeded at his goal. But he's also, if you look at all the villains in Final Fantasy, Kefka is that villain that from the minute you see him to the very end, he is just pure evil. He oozes that bad guy feel, and he is just downright monstrous, you know, in personality and what he does. He is pure evil. Now, because I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the characters, the story, from bits I can remember, not that amazing. The fights are okay in my opinion. I don't mind the fights, but there is a problem which some of the Final Fantasy games suffer. If you want to min-max, you have to go through the whole game as low a level as possible. You can't level up if you want to properly min-max, because the stat gain in Final Fantasy is tied to the espers, and unfortunately the best ones that give the best stats you don't get until the World of Ruin. So for me, it's a B. I'm sorry, it's a B. Maybe that could go up to an A if I was to replay it sometime soon, but for now I'm sticking with B tier. There are some good things about the game, but for me personally there's also a lot of bad, so I'm gonna leave it in the middle. As I say though, you know, once I replay the game and I get a refresher on the story, maybe I would move it to A, but it's right now, at the point of making this video, it's a B, I'm sorry to say. Right, let's move on now to the games that pretty much everybody has played, because I know a lot of people probably started around 7 and then maybe they went back for the older ones and so on and so forth. Now, Final Fantasy VII is publicly acknowledged as the most loved Final Fantasy game, but I don't necessarily think it is the most loved. I think it's just the most vocal community. It's also the most toxic community, okay? Because if you insult FF7, the fanboys will flip the fuck out. You cannot say anything negative about 7 without starting a literal war. You know what I mean? Now, for 7, 7's not in my top 5. Let me put it that way, okay? 7 is not in my top 5. And the reason 7 is not in my top 5 is, while Sephiroth is pretty cool, I don't think he's a truly amazing villain, simply due to the fact we don't really get much screen time with Sephiroth himself. It's more backstory about Sephiroth, why he does what he does, how he's sort of crazy and all that sort of stuff. But the actual screen time with Sephiroth himself, there isn't really much. So the villain aspect there, it's more a case of he said, she said, and then, you know, yeah, he tries to destroy the world with Meteor, but that's kind of all we see about Sephiroth in the OG FF7. The overall story dynamic is, it's not there for me. There are some cool points, don't get me wrong, there are some very cool points in the game, but for the most part, when it comes to the story, it feels disconnecting. Like, to me, it feels disconnecting. Then there's the whole, you know, Cloud is crazy thing after Medial. The characters, they aren't lovable. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Yuffie, I love Aerith. Those are definitely my favorite characters. Barrett can be funny at times, but it does suffer from that, you know, that old 90s stigma of black guys always swearing, always violent. You know what I mean? Like, he is basically based on Mr. T. It doesn't do it for me. I'm not a huge fan of Barrett. He can be funny. He can definitely be funny, but the repeatedness of it does get tiring. Red 13, nah. I mean, there's not a lot of growth there. I really wish they expanded more on, you know, his father and all that, and his actual backstory. But once you do Cosmo Canyon, he's sort of just there for the ride. Sort of like Kate Sith, you know, like, yeah, it's Reeve. But even when we find out, like, he's a spy and that, nothing really interesting ever comes of that, you know. That was definitely something that was left out. And then if we just go to Tifa, like, Tifa she's the big boob model, you know what I mean? She is the sex Sal's character. Her personality is not there. She's annoying as shit, if you ask me. I'm not a fan of Tifa. She is very annoying with the whole, oh no, Cloud, you were there. No, you weren't there. Oh, Nibelheim. Whatever. But the battles, so the materia system itself, right? I like the materia system. I do like the materia system. I think a little more variety on the weapons and armor, you know, for double growth, for triple growth. I think that could have been expanded more, a little like it was in New Threat. But the overall battle system, the AP gain, the XP gain, to me that is fine. You know, that is definitely fine. Item usage could be a little more varied, especially, you know, with W item being a thing. But for me, right, this is going to be a very problematic placement, because I'm drawing on thoughts of the OG FF7 on one hand, but then I'm drawing on thoughts of New Threat on the other. So this is going to be a double-edged sword, okay? If it was the OG Final Fantasy VII on a standard, with everything I've just said, I would place it in the B tier. If it was New Threat, I would place it in the S tier, okay? So you can see my dilemma. But what I'm going to do, because I love New Threat so much and I can tolerate the OG 7, I'm going to put it in the A tier, you know? Now, the materia system is what saves it for me, honestly. If it was a normal leveling system, a little like, you know, the older Final Fantasies, for me it would probably be down in the C tier. That's quite a difference, I know. But for now, I'm going to leave it in the A tier just because of New Threat. New Threat has literally saved FF7's placement for me. So, yeah, let's move on to 8. This is the one that I think people are going to be triggered by. Especially when they see where I pour it. Where's it going? Where's it going? Where's it going? No, I'm gonna trigger people. It's S tier for me. So why is FF8 S tier? There's so much to do. I love FF8. It's the only game that I can play for 80 hours before I even finish the tutorial, because Triple Triad is freaking amazing. Now, yes, there are some minigames that are annoying. The Chocobos, for example, that is definitely an annoying minigame. You have the whole Obel Lake side quest, which, while a novelty, got old very, very fast. But the minigames are good. I do like the minigames in general. If we look at the story side of things, that's where it is lacking. Like, don't get me wrong, FF8 is lacking on the story side. I do think something should be changed. However, the whole deal with Squall and Laguna, that is, in my opinion, a really nice little backstory that I do wish they expanded upon more in game. But I do love the connection. I love the father-son relationship. But I wish there was more detail in-game, you know what I mean? For the most detail for that whole backstory, you have to go to the Ultimania, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. Now, Squall as a character, I like his character growth. He starts off as that clothed, selfish, not really bothered kind of person, but then because of everything he goes through, he starts getting that inner conflict, you know? He starts opening up, he falls in love with Renoa, but then he's also like fighting himself, you know, because he doesn't know what he wants to do. Remember, he's only like a teenager. He goes from being this mercenary, always being told what to do his entire life, and then out of nowhere, like when Garden is mobile, he becomes the leader. He gets thrown in charge of everybody's life. He could make a decision that could kill everybody, And that leads to a lot of character development, especially, you know, when Renoa collapses and he just doesn't know what to do with himself. Like, that is good character development to me anyway. Likewise with Renoa, it's sort of the same thing, you know, there's good character development there, if you ask me. For the other characters, I'm not a huge fan, to be honest. Like, they don't have anything that is really gripping, you know. It is a game that is very much focused on Squall and Renoa. The other characters, they're there, but they are definitely backseat characters, which is kind of a shame. Something definitely could have been done, but no, for the most part, they don't really have an important presence in the game, at least story-wise. Yes, I know there's the whole orphanage scene and things like that, but it is what it is. As for the villain, you know, evil sorceress, the villain doesn't really do much for me in 8 either, to be fair. However, if we look at battles, now, people hate the junction system because of how abusable it is. Me personally, I like the junction system, okay? Yes, it is abusable, but you have to think, the game's been out like 20 years. You know, 25 years the game's been out. So of course it's going to be abusable. We all know the ins and the outs of it now. Back in the day, people didn't know the ins and the outs. We didn't know the best spells to junction. So it's like learning the junction system was much more of an ordeal back in the day. We couldn't just look up what the best spells were to put on these stats to be overpowered. You know what I mean? So for me, like that memory going through the junction system, not knowing what to do, and then slowly learning the process to be ridiculously overpowered was great. Yes, you could get overpowered magic early on through cards and card mod. You can do that in all Final Fantasy games. You can get overpowered in all of them early. 8 is nothing new. It's just earlier. You know what I mean? Now, one of the problems I think is probably going to come up is the way people view the leveling system on how, oh, you can't level up in Final Fantasy VIII because everything gets stronger. No, I'm sorry, that's a bullshit argument. If you have that argument, you're an idiot. Now, why is that argument so flawed? Simple. So, bosses, 99% of bosses in the game have a set level cap. Yes, normal enemies will level with your average party level. Bosses, most bosses, I should say, do not. For example, Omega, he is always level 100 no matter what. Ifrit, he is always level 6 no matter what. Fake President in the train, he is always level 13 no matter what. Okay? Now, the bosses have level ranges and they have level caps. Yes, they can be low level. They can be like level 7, level 8 and so on and so forth. But they will have a maximum level. You could get to level 100 at the very start of the game and 99% of the bosses will not level that high. There are a few that do. However, the ones that do are typically the normal mob bosses. So for example, the Ruby Dragon you fight as Laguna, that can be level 100 simply due to the fact that is a regular mob. Okay? And that is why I think the whole leveling argument is ridiculous, because let's be honest, you get no encounters incredibly early. You get no encounters the minute you get Diablo. You get Diablo straight after the Dollop mission. You're going to spend 99% of the game using no encounters. What does it matter what level the random encounters are? It doesn't. You know, it doesn't. It simply doesn't. And I even showed in the maximum overpowered you can get in FF8 video, the differences between leveling from level 7 with booster abilities like the stat boosting abilities to level 100 versus just leveling normally and junctioning. Here's the thing. The end game is the same. It is the same, okay? You are still going to need, like, even if you level from, you know, the start of the game all the way to level 100 using stat boosting abilities, you're still going to have to junction to hit the cap, okay? Yes, you could use lesser tier spells, but it doesn't matter. you are still going to need, you know, pretty much the same junctions across the board. Yeah, you could put ultimate on defense and things like that, you know, like magic defense instead, but that is literally pure min-maxing. Like, if you are not going to spend 600 hours min-maxing the game to hell and back, do not care about leveling. It is a dumb argument. Because remember, as soon as you get Diablo, you're getting no encounter. When you get no encounter, you're not going to be fighting random encounters. And random encounters are the only thing that level up with you. That's why when I see people moaning about leveling in FF8, I just like, you know, I just flick my eyes. Like, I roll my eyes, you know what I mean? It's a dumb argument. There's so much more involved in FF8. You do not need to care about leveling up. The game is a joke at level 7. The game is a joke at level 100. If you know how to junction, it doesn't matter what level enemies are, okay? You will still be able to kill a level 100 enemy the same way you kill a level 7 enemy. The only difference is you might have to hit it 2 or 3 extra times. Right, rant aside, let's move on to 9, shall we? So, straight off the bat, 9, for me, S tier. Like, hands down, 9 is S tier. I fucking love FF9. Chocobo Hot and Cold, Dagger, Zidane's humorous personality, the connection between all the characters. Like, all the characters represent an emotion, the trauma they all go through, the growth from the start of the game to the end of the game. It was done phenomenal. And then, something I've not brought up in this list at all so far, the OST. 9's OST is fucking amazing, okay? Now, 9 to me has the best overall soundtrack in the entire series, okay? There are some bad scores, sure, but across you know, like all the different tracks, best OST. It's nice and colourful, which I think is an enjoyable aspect. You've got minigames like Chocobo Hot and Cold, you got frog catching, you got the auction house, you know, all these little things add up to me. Kuja is an interesting villain. They went back to the whole brother is the villain like style, which is a little iffy. It was definitely influenced a bit by Star Wars, you know, like there is quite a few Star Wars references in the game, but it's also a nod back to every game in the series before it. There's something from everything in FF9. The only thing I would like really have a problem with is, oh, what's his name? Necron. I was going to say Nemesis for some reason. Yeah, Necron. Like, that is my only problem, you know? That boss came out of left field, and to me it seemed more like an add-on, you know what I mean? That's kind of the only problem I have. Now, yes, the grinding is annoying if you want to pure min-max, but it's like 8. You don't have to pure min-max. It is dumb. Nothing is going to, like, require that level of stats. And then there's also the secret boss, Ozma. Very, very, very fun fight. Yes, it can be annoying with the RNG, but I personally like it. You know, I personally like fighting against RNG. And then you also have the Yans. You know, you have Yans as a nice fun encounter as well for the end game grinding. And of course, Grand Dragon farming on Disc 1. Right, let's move on. Now, I don't need to say anything here. I don't need to say anything here. If you know me, you know why I've put that there. If you've watched any Final Fantasy videos on my channel, you know 10 is my favourite. Love Yuna. Underwater date scene, best FF scene ever in my opinion. The music is phenomenal. Battles are fun. It's good grinding. There are super bosses. The story makes some sense. There's a lot of background lore in the whole story as well, like the war 1000 years ago. It is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Just ignore the Cloisters of Trials. But yeah, I like 10. I do love 10. Right, 10-2. I think that says it all. It's, don't get me wrong, I like the characters. Apart from Pain, I'm not a big fan of Pain. There is character development. I am okay with the dress sphere system. That doesn't bother me. Battles, I'm fine with the battles as well. The story could use a little work. It's not terrible. It's not amazing. The reason this is ranked so low for me is 100% requirements. Okay, if you were to 100% FF10-2 over multiple playthroughs, then it's a fine game. Okay, it is perfectly fine, it's enjoyable, and it would probably be up around the A or the B tier. Okay, but if you are trying to 100% it in one single playthrough, it is batshit insane. You can't even fucking blink without making a mistake. It is so strict. You have to speak to characters at very specific points from the start of the game to the end of the game. There are quest lines that start in chapter 1 and end in chapter 5, and you have to stay on top of them through the whole game with no mention from the actual game itself. It has some of the most bullshit 100% flags ever. This is literally the game that you cannot make a mistake. If you're trying to 100% this, you need a guide in one playthrough. Like, if you're trying to 100% in one playthrough, you need a guide. No way can you 100% this game from memory. Okay? There's way too much to do. It's, at least as far as I'm concerned, way too much to do. It's impossible to 100% from memory. That's why it's so low, because the 100% requirements are straight up fucking bullshit. Right. 11. Now, I've never played 11. I've tried to play 11. I did make a character. This was after 14 came out, by the way. This is after I got into the whole MMO thing. I did make a character. I started that character. I couldn't find out where to go. I was running around for like half an hour to an hour. I couldn't even find like an NPC to talk to or anything like that. So I couldn't really give it a fair shot. But because I've never really played it, I'm going to put it down in the D tier just because I've never played it. So I can't really say anything good or bad about it. Now, I do know a few things. I know that you lose EXP when you die, so you can level down. I also know about Absolute Virtue. Let's leave it at that, shall we? Yeah, if you don't know, Absolute Virtue is a super boss they added into the game. There was a raid of people trying to fight it, where they were trying to kill it for weeks. Literally weeks straight. One fight, weeks straight. I don't mean they would die, they would restart. I mean, the fight lasted for weeks. It was way overtuned, and it also had an ability called Benediction, which the boss could use whenever it fell below, I think it was below 50%, that ability became available for it, which would fully heal it. So a boss that you would have, like, God knows how many people fighting all at once trying to kill it, it would then be able to fully heal itself. It's like a group of people did originally keep the fight going for weeks, and they still didn't beat it. So yeah, that's Absolute Virtue. Right, 12. Now, I'm sorry for fans of 12. Let's talk about this a little. So, I don't want any arguments in the comment section. Let me just say that. I don't want any arguments in the comment section. The story for FF12 is a rip-off of Star Wars. It is a rip-off of Star Wars. There are way too many similarities. Have you guys seen on YouTube? There's that video where it compares 12 to Star Wars with all the similarities, and I mean, god damn it, half the cutscenes are just straight rip-offs, for crying out loud. The story is basically identical to Star Wars as well, but the story is also more boring than Star Wars, in my opinion. The characters are terrible. The main character, Vaughn, for example, he serves no purpose. You could remove him from the game. The game is no different. It is literally exactly the same. Same with Primallo. Remove Primallo from the game. The story doesn't change. That is bad character development. Okay. Then you also have Yeezamat. Yeezamat, yeah, fun fight. Remember that fight, guys? The boss with 10 billion health. Wait, was it 10 billion or was it? Yeah, it was 10 billion. Or was it a billion? No, 10 million. No, it wasn't 10 million because Penance was 10 million. I don't know, I can't remember. Either way, the fight takes like 4 hours on the OG. On the Zodiac Age, with multiple jobs, more equipment and things like that, yes, it is quicker. Especially if you use the speed up booster, it only takes like 30 to 40 minutes. Still kind of annoying though. Still kind of annoying. Now, I do like the Gambit system, you know, being able to set up your characters to autoplay for every scenario. I actually like that system. But for the most part, I'm not a fan of many of 12 systems, to be fair. The Gambit system is probably the only thing I like in the system. And then, of course, there is the overwhelmingly obvious problem of the RNG system. So, for me, it's down here. It's down here. That's why you don't really see much 12 content on my channel. I'm not a big fan of it. And then Revenant Wings, now this falls into the same category as FF11. This is a sequel to FF12. I've never played it, so I can't say anything about it. I'm just going to stick it in the D tier for now, but at the same time, I've not heard anything good about it either. So there's nothing I can talk about there. Right, 13. 13, I'm probably going to trigger people. It's middle of the road for me. I like 13. Everyone calls it a hallway simulator. Hello. FF10's a hallway simulator. Like, don't even try to argue that. FF10 is a hallway simulator. You walk along a straight path. Yes, you could go back at times. At times, you can go back. However, the majority of the game, you can only move forward. Okay? So, don't try and bullshit me there. They are both hallway simulators. I don't want to hear that complaint, okay? The story is a bit lacking in 13. Yes, the characters are infuriating at times. There is a lot of dumbness in the game as well, especially with characters like Hope and his relationship to Lightning. The battle system, I think, is unfairly treated. Everybody complains about auto battle in FF13. Guess what? You don't have to use auto battle. You can actually go into the settings and change that, so auto battle isn't first in the list. Like, if your complaint about the 13 battle system is auto battle, that's your own fault. Nobody forces you to use it. You can go and select your abilities manually, queue them up manually. You can activate and deactivate the ATB manually. That's on you if you have a problem with the battle system because of auto battle. If you have a problem with something else, then that's fine. Let's talk about it. But if your only complaint about the battles is auto battle, no, that's on you, I'm afraid. Now, in terms of the bosses, they're hit and miss. They are very hit and miss. Some are tough, some are not tough. The summons where, you know, you have to sort of do specific things for them, I think is an interesting take. Something we hadn't really seen before, but some of them did get kind of annoying. But I'm not going to leave that as a problem with 13. Now, the post game for 13 is kind of non-existent, unfortunately. Yes, you have like Longui farming, you have the Seath Stone missions, although the Seath Stone missions, if you ask me, are terrible. Some of them are okay, but for the most part, they're kind of bad. And the quote-unquote super secret boss, you know, the optional post game boss, too lacking. It's too easy to be honest. But the Crystarium is kind of fun. I wish they didn't limit the grinding too much, you know, because you are limit leveled on the Crystarium. You can't advance too far because of story restrictions. But personally, I still enjoy 13. You know, I enjoy 13. It's got some good music. It has some good cutscenes. Unfortunately, it's like the 99% of the game is copyrighted on YouTube, so you're not going to see much of that on this channel either. But yeah, I think it's an okay game. It's not the best. It's not the worst. Okay. Now, 13-2. Right, here's the thing, okay? I like 13-2 in a sense, but I also ruined it for myself, okay? The reason I ruined it for myself is when the game came out, I platinumed it right away for myself, and then I immediately did another platinum playthrough on my friend's PSN account. So I did 2 platinum playthroughs back to back, and it annoyed me. Now, the battle system is more fun than 13. The characters have their individual levels. You can capture monsters, level them up, so it's a little like Pokemon. The story is more bearable. It does have its annoying moments. You know, like the main antagonist isn't that amazing in my opinion. But then there's also the time travel plotline, which is freaking terrible. Like, time travel, please stay away from time travel, Square. You can't do it very well. And 13-2 just proves that. Like, time travel, no. I'm not a fan of really anything with time travel mechanics, to be honest. Like, most things do it very, very badly. There are the few hidden gems that do time travel well, but for the most part, it's a cancer. So yeah, I'm leaving it at that, basically. I like the battles, I like the post-game, lot of secret bosses, and the secret bosses you can also beat at the very start of the game as well. In fact, we're 13-2. When the demo first came out on the PS3, you guys might have seen, back on my old channel before I made this one, I'm that idiot who grinded to max level on the demo, and I beat the boss without weakening it. If you don't know, one of the bosses in 13-2, for story purposes, you have to use like a piece of technology in the area, and it lowers the boss's stats to make it beatable. If you don't do that, you can fight it, and it's a post-game boss if you fight it normally, basically. So weakened version is like early game boss, like first hour of the game, whereas if you don't weaken it, it's post-game boss, one of the hardest bosses in the game. And I did that in the demo. I beat the hard version in the demo, which was fun. Hey, go me. That's how much of a no-life I am. But yeah, it's an okay game. It's not the best, it's not the worst. I think it has more positives than negatives anyway. Now, Lightning Returns. I can't say much about Lightning Returns because I've never played the English version of the game. I've only played the Japanese version. So I don't know everything that goes on in the story. But I know it's centered around lightning, I know it's centered around hope. I don't really like either of those characters personally. The costume system seemed like a worse version of Dress Spheres to me, but again, I never played it in English, so I can't comment on that. It was a very easy game to platinum, even though I didn't understand anything. The time travel again sort of ruins it a bit though, so you know, that's all I can really say for like 13 Lightning Returns, to be honest. I do need to do a playthrough in English though, you know. Right, 14. I don't think I'm gonna surprise anybody here. 14 to me is S tier. I have played so much FF14, it is unreal. I've played since the closed alpha for A Realm Reborn. I did not play 1.0. I wish I did, but I did not have a good enough PC to run it, and that was it. You know, like for 2.0 was where I started the game. I love raiding. I love crafting. Not a big fan of playing with, you know, random people, but that's just because I don't like playing with bad players. Obviously, you can do 99.9% of the game as a solo player, but for me, I love the raids, the endgame raids. That's why I still play it today, because that is where I get the most enjoyment from the game. But there's also, like, it's always been updated. There's always new content coming. Like, I don't know of anybody that has done everything that 14 has to offer. I don't know of anybody that at any time has managed to hit 100% completion, because there is so much to do. It's not that the tasks take a lot of time. Yes, some of them do take a lot of time, but those are the minority, okay? The problem with 100% in this game is there is just so much to do, especially because there's new content coming like every 2 to 3 months. So it's like a patch will come out, you'll finish that, boom, another patch is out, you know? And of course, yes, you have to pay a sub, but all the updates for the 2-year lifespan of an expansion are free, so you're always getting that content. So your sub fee is basically like buying DLC for the game, because those patches will add, I mean, anywhere from 10 to hundreds of hours of gameplay. You know what I mean? That to me is worth it as a sub fee. And then of course there's a new expansion every 2 to 2.5 years. When the story is phenomenal. It is emotional. There is a reason Shadowbringers, which was the 4th expansion, there's a reason that won basically every goddamn video game award there is. Okay, if you've not played 14, don't think about the MMO aspect. Don't think about the time it takes. Just play it and do the story. Okay, just do the story. Get the free trial. You can do the entirety of the first, like the base game and the first expansion for free. Like just play the free trial if you've not played it yet. Don't worry about endgame, because that's where the time sinks are. Don't worry about, oh, it's an MMO, it's gonna take me 10,000 hours. No, just do the story. You could do the story casually in about 2 months. That's from start of the base game all the way through to the current expansion. okay? If you were to just do the free trial, you could do that in a month, maybe 2 months if you only play a few hours a day. It's highly worth doing, okay? Highly worth doing. Now for the last one, 15. I think we all know where this is going. We all know where 15 is going there. It's a glorified game about a boy band, and you're getting the lead singer laid, basically. That's the way I see 15. The entire point of 99% of the story is Nocta's gonna meet his bimbo on the side, and then when he finally gets there, boom, she dies. That's kind of 15's story in a nutshell. And then things get really weird with the ending. Like the ending made no sense. Like the last, well, not even the ending itself, like the last section of the game, that makes no sense at all to me. But that's probably because of the fact the game was released unfinished. The story made no sense on release, so what did they have to do? They had to release a whole bunch of DLC for it to make sense. Oh, did I also mention you had to watch a fucking movie to understand what happened before the game? I know. Like, imagine releasing a game and then needing to watch a movie and play a bunch of DLC to understand what happened in the base game. It is so fucking dumb. And then to make matters worse, the final DLC that was planned for it, that was meant to fully explain everything, was cancelled. In other words, the game is still incomplete. The story is still incomplete. The story still makes no fucking sense. Oh my god, I can't go on with 15. I need to stop talking about this, otherwise I'm gonna rant for way too long. But yeah, story bad, gameplay bad, game bad. At least as far as I'm concerned anyway. But yeah, we need to stop now, otherwise I'm gonna rant about 15. But though guys, that's gonna be it for this video. That is my ranking now for Final Fantasy as a series. Yes, there are things like Crystal Chronicles and Tactics that are not on there. I have not really played many of the spin-offs, so I cannot rank them. For me, they would just be down here, so there's no point in me including them. So, what do you guys think? Do you like my list? Do you hate my list? Let's talk about it down below in the comments. If you disagree with any of these placements, comment. Let's talk about it. But though guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video nonetheless. If you have, be sure to hit that thumbs up button because likes help the channel tremendously. And of course, if you are new around here, then hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more content. As always though everybody, thank you for watching and I'll see you soon.